Live from New York City, it's the Gary Null Show. And now, your host, Gary Null.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Null. Normally at this time, we go through probably 8 to 10 different scientific studies, all meant to encourage you to make healthier choices, to live a longer and healthier life and prevent or moderate the different diseases that we have. But there's one thing that can help everyone, absolutely everyone, and that is understanding just a simple rule of eating. I learned this a long time ago. I was back on WMCA. The year was 1972. And I got a call from a doctor down in San Antonio, Texas. He was someone I didn't know anything about, but he wrote about food combining. And he said that he was getting really good results treating patients using intermittent fasting. So I went down, I spent 2 days, and sure enough, he had a lot of people at this clinic, and they were doing very well. And he would give them juices and protein shakes and salads, but they would go long periods of time, generally up to 18 hours a day, without eating any solid food. There must have been 50 people, and I spoke with each one. And they all said the same thing, that they had conditions that were not responding to traditional medical treatment, but here they were. Well, when enough people tell you that they're getting better and all from different conditions, none of them knew each other, they just all were patients, you began to realize that that's some good clinical observations. It's not a scientific study, but nonetheless, every doctor in America, what do they do when they see you? They say, how are you feeling? Any problems? If you're on medication, they want to make sure that you're not taking too much or too little or the right ones. And so those observations are important. You don't have to have a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial to prove that something works. And why do I say that? Because I found when I came back as a research scientist at that time, and for the next 36 years at the Institute of Applied Biology, I tried a lot of different experiments. And one of the experiments I tried is duplicating his work and with food combining. What is food combining? And why is that important? Why is how we eat a meal important? Let's just say you wake up and you're the average person, you have a cup of coffee, or coffee and a bagel, or coffee and something for breakfast. The caffeine in the coffee can overstimulate the body. That adversely affects the heart rhythms. It adversely affects the impulses in the body, the electrical impulses or pulses, and it also really disrupts the hydrochloric acid in your stomach because coffee has its own acids. And as a result, when the two meet, you frequently get what is called a gastrointestinal reflux, meaning your acids in the stomach that are meant to digest food can go back up into the esophagus. Now, the esophagus, like your lips, your tongue, and this whole long tube that goes to your body, your intestinal tract, that's known as mucous membranes, is very susceptible to inflammation. So you don't want to have anything really caustic in the diet. And yet caffeine is extremely caustic. And I believe that it shouldn't be used at all. Now, if you want to give the organic green coffee bean and you want to pulverize it and you want to extract nutrients from it, fine. There's a lot of good nutrients in the coffee bean unheated. But once you brew that up, there's all kinds of problems. The trouble is we like to think that we've got to have our coffee to start our day. No, what is happening is you're artificially starting your body, but that's adversely affecting your natural adrenaline level. It's adversely affecting what is called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That's your actual combustion, how your cells actually thrive and are able to give you energy. So if we combine our foods properly, if we eat the proper foods, then everything changes. Because what is the whole purpose of eating a meal? It's not just to satisfy your appetite or satisfy some mood you're in, to have some reward food, and therefore get a dopamine hit in the brain, much like cocaine, much like heroin. Well, yeah, you can become addicted to food, especially sugar, and especially things that will cause that phenomena in the brain. I wrote a book on this years ago called The Food-Mood-Body Connection, where you can really control your emotions and depression and anxiety frequently just by understanding what to eat, what not to eat, what to drink, and what not to drink. So what should we not be consuming at all in any amount? Coffee, fructose-sweetened soft beverages, soft drinks, and especially those that are carbonated, that really upsets digestion. And foods that take a long time to digest, like highly cooked barbecued ribs and let's say fatty meats and cheese. Takes a long time to digest. And the longer that takes to digest, a phenomena happens. Let's say that you have bacon or sausages, which are very common for breakfast, or if you eat in a fast food restaurant, they're giving you eggs and bacon and sausages. They give you everything. I mean, they stack up a whole meal, far more than what the body can process. So now comes lunch, and what happens? You're hungry again, yet your stomach still has breakfast. So you eat more. Now, when it comes to dinner, you still have lunch in your stomach. So then you start to expand the stomach. The stomach doesn't know what to do. The body doesn't know what to do. And so it dumps partially digested food. Your food should actually, when it goes in the intestine, be somewhat like a smooth potato soup. It goes in as bolus when you chew it up, and then it's digested as what we call chyme, C-H-Y-M-E. And there's two little holes underneath your tongue that secrete enzymes, ptyalin and amylase. And they salivate when you chew slowly, and you chew, let's say, 15 times a piece of food till it's properly broken down. That's the mechanistic way, your teeth, your jaw, and the digestion, your tongue moving all this food around. And so now you've got the enzymes saturating this bolus, goes into the stomach. Now, if you're eating right, you're not overeating. You're not overstuffing the relatively small pear-shaped like stomach. But if you're eating the right combinations, then you're eating food that is easy to digest. For example, if I were to have a lunch, perfect combination, which digests very easily and quickly, and therefore provide me with the nutrients, because you have digestion, you have assimilation, meaning getting it from your gut into your bloodstream through your liver, and then off into the cells, and then you have absorption, where it's actually being absorbed into the cell, and then you have elimination, where the material that's not able to be digested goes as ligocellulose or fibrous material, non-soluble fiber, out of the body. Now that's ideal. And you shouldn't have too many liquids in the meal. But we have this bad habit of drinking a beverage after we take one or two chews of a piece of food. And that's not good, because I can assure you, you're not going to get all the nutrients out of the food, assuming this is even a healthy food to begin with. So instead, try this. First and foremost, don't have a beverage with a meal. You can have it an hour after the meal. You can have it up to 10 to 15 minutes before the meal. But unless it's a soup, then don't have the beverage, because that disrupts digestion, because the body doesn't know what to do. Hydrochloric acid that breaks down proteins, and it starts to break down the protein in the meal, but now you start having all this beverage in there, and it dilutes it. So the body then produces more hydrochloric acid, more beverage, more dilution. The hotter the food you eat, like a pizza or something with chili peppers in it, the more thirsty you are. So the more you drink, the more you dilute food in the stomach. So it takes a long time to digest. And because the body doesn't know what to do, it just purges and starts to push only partially digested food into the top part of the intestine. And that means you're only going to get a small percentage of nutrients actually digested and in the body and utilized. So let's just say I had some starchy vegetables. I had a grain, let's say a whole grain, not a refined grain, quinoa, red quinoa, or millet, yellow millet, or brown rice, or any combination that you want of a completely intact, whole grain. That's giving you a protein. But I want some beans in there too. Maybe some kidney beans. All right. A nice oat sauce or some sauce on the different foods. I can also have some sea vegetables, wakame, kombu, hajiki, nori. All of those are good. They're providing you with minerals from the ocean, including iodine, which helps your thyroid gland. Now, I've got some seaweed. I've got some brown rice, some beans, and some starchy vegetables. That's a perfect meal because it all digests together. You don't have any simple sugars that will cause gas and bloating. And by the way, how often do you get gases or bloating? How often do you have to unbuckle your belt because your stomach is expanding? That's because of improper food combining or eating too much food or having so much liquid in the diet that it's filled up the stomach and the stomach has to purge itself. So you see, if I have a breakfast, and let's say I have steel cut oatmeal, that takes longer to digest, but it's a really substantively good grain to have. And let's say I want some maple syrup on it. I won't put a lot, but I might put some blueberries in there, wild blueberries in particular, because wild blueberries are terrific for your immune system. So I've got some blueberries. I've got maybe some walnut butter or walnuts, a handful of walnuts or walnut butter, which is just the walnuts ground up. For those of you who may have diverticulitis or some other problem with the intestine, where you need food that is not as hard in its fiber. Now I've got sprinkle some cinnamon on there that helps maintain blood sugar levels. And that's a perfect meal to eat. And you want to liquefy a little bit of it? Fine. Use rice milk, almond milk, coconut milk, non-dairy. That prevents the allergies. Anytime you hear someone eat and then do this, clearing their throat, that's because they're frequently having an allergic reaction to what they're eating. You shouldn't have to be clearing your throat. And also, you shouldn't wake up in the morning and have mucus in the corner of the eyes or excess mucus coming out of your nose or clearing your throat. Again, that's frequently because you're allergic to something you've eaten. Now, for that, to see if you're allergic to something you're eating that you may not even be aware of, you can do what is called the Coca pulse test, developed by Dr. Coca. What you do is this. You line up the foods that you most commonly eat on a daily basis. And then at night, you put that single food beside you on the table, or have someone just give it to you. The key is when you wake up in the morning, you stay in bed, you take your pulse for 60 seconds. Let's say your pulse is 70 beats per minute. You write it down. Then you take a single item of food or a beverage. You don't even have to swallow it. Just keep it in your mouth for about 60 seconds. Either swallow or spit it out. Now you just lay there for 20 minutes. You don't get up, because if you get up, you're going to increase your pulse. After 20 minutes, you take your pulse again. If your pulse is increased more than 5 beats per minute, there's a high probability that you have an allergic reaction. But then check yourself. When you walk now, do you have any pain in your ankles? All right, that could be causing an allergic reaction, which manifests as pain, like a lactic acid buildup. Maybe you find that your skin has some irritation. Again, we know some people are allergic to strawberries, and I don't think it's strawberries they're allergic to. I believe it's how they're sprayed. Same way with apples, because some people have no reaction to an organic, unsprayed fruit, but a high reaction if the product is sprayed. So now at the end of a week of doing this every morning, you have a pretty good indication of at least the primary foods in your diet, the ones you eat the most of and the most often, which of those are triggering a reaction. I'll give you one example of this. There was a Dr. Marshall Mandel, and we duplicated this in my own office to prove that it worked at the Institute of Applied Biology. He took in fact, it came from the daughter of a woman I was working with who had multiple sclerosis. She was approaching end stage. I worked with her and got her health back. She got her strength back, could coordinate. In fact, I introduced her to about 700 people when I was introducing a group of doctors at RFK Junior High School over on the East Side. And she was in the audience. I introduced her. Here's someone who has an advanced illness that medicine has no answer for. And yet look at her today. And she told her story. But the second part of the story is really interesting. Her father was a well-known medical doctor, worked for NASA, and he was going to have to retire. He was going to have to retire because his hands became so immobile. They were stiff and always in pain, and his fingers were always kind of turned in, almost like a claw, and he just couldn't practice medicine anymore. So because of the help she received, she suggested that he goes to a Dr. Mandel. He does. And Mandel had a room, and he had a looked like a large plate. And in it, he had little vials. And each vial had a number on the bottom, but no one knew what the number was. So he would simply ask the person, stand up out of the chair and walk to the end of the room, about 15 feet. Walk back, sit down. No problems, no pain, no loss of balance, fine. And then next bottle. And then after a bunch of these bottles, he couldn't get up out of the chair from just a single drop under the tongue. And so they wrote down the number on the bottom of the bottle, and they mixed them all up again, and they did it again and again. Every time he took one drop from that bottle, he lost his energy. He was in excruciating pain. When they unblinded it, it was beef. So he was a big beef eater. He had been on a high-protein diet in which he was eating a lot of beef. And so he went on a fast from those foods, meaning he couldn't have anything with animal proteins in it. And lo and behold, arthritis cleared up, movement of his hands and fingers came back. He was able to continue with his medical practice. But then months later, Dr. Mandel received a call and said, it's back. And he said, well, what did you eat? He said, I didn't have any beef at all. And then when they went through every single item in the meal he had that day, he had Jell-O or a gelatin. And that comes from beef. And he didn't know that. Most people don't. As a result, that's how sensitive he was. Now, why do I say this? Because all the time I'm meeting with people who think they have one thing when they actually have something else. And it's frequently an allergic reaction. So that's one thing you should know, that you get used to eating the same foods every day. Don't. Rotate your diet. Do a 5-day rotation. So if you have quinoa Monday, have brown rice Tuesday, and millet on Wednesday. And each day have a different grain. The same way with beans. Pinto beans, then garbanzo beans, then navy beans and flat beans, and go through the whole, there are over 100 different beans. And same way with fruits. Don't just have an orange a day or an apple a day, as good as they are, have each day a different fruit. So by having a rotating diet, you're not as susceptible to food allergies. And they can also manifest in brain fog and even in some very aggressive brain behavior. In fact, there was a well-known musician, I won't mention the name, who was a great performer, but he would also become very erratic, and especially by the end of a concert, and they just thought it was just ego and a distempered personality. I was brought in, went through the diet. He had a pretty good diet, but he was always nervous, so he had some milk before he would go up on stage. It seemed to calm him down. And then when we did a test, his pulse just jumped up. And in his case, his allergy was a cerebral allergy in the brain. So by giving him some neutralizing doses, it was brought back to normal. But then when he gave up milk completely and had an herbal tea in its place, never again had that reaction. So an awful lot of things can happen when you're eating the wrong foods. Now, what are the absolute worst foods that harm your body? All of your deep fried, trans fat oils used like in French fries and in pretzels and and muffins, all of the palm oils that are used, of the animal proteins and refined carbohydrates, simple sugars and artificial sweeteners, and caffeinated beverages. That's the worst of the worst. All of those produce disease. They do not produce health. None of those can heal you, but they can kill you if you do it long enough and don't have enough healthy foods to give some balance. And let's go back to food combining. Eat less at a meal and make sure you have a good breakfast, but it should be a wholesome breakfast. Fresh glass of made juice, terrific in the morning. And the juice is loaded with enzymes, and you need those enzymes. And antioxidants, you need the antioxidants to stay healthy. And high quality fiber. So the more berries you use, the better. The more plant-based protein you use, the better. Hemp, split pea, brown rice. Those are all good sources. And the essential fatty acids, flaxseed oil, the omega-3, 6, 9, and 12 fatty acids. So by combining foods, by not eating as much, by taking your time, by chewing thoroughly, by going for a walk after every meal, about a 25-minute walk, then helps where your blood sugar would normally spike up. And if you're pre-diabetic and diabetic, you don't want that. That'll exacerbate diabetic neuropathy and pain. Instead, by going for a walk, it keeps your blood sugar more even, speeds up digestion, so you don't feel heavy and full and bloated, gaseous. Simple things, nothing complicated. But we've just been conditioned to eat what we want when we want, to eat foods that we feel good about. Remember this, any food that makes you feel good is bad for you, because food's not meant to make you feel good. It's meant to be good for you, in which case it's no different than someone taking a drug, recreational drug or regular drug, and they'll feel good. That's not good. And then when you come down from that, you start realizing that the body's natural capacity to feel good was thwarted. After all, what is the number one cause of constipation today in the United States? Overuse of laxatives. Because once you start using laxatives, yeah, you'll have a bowel movement, but the normal peristaltic movement is going to be diminished. And when you don't have the anti-constipation medication, then you bloat, you congest. So that's why let the body process foods naturally and stay away from antacids. Just don't eat the foods that cause the hydrochloric acid to become reactive from the food you're eating. Nothing terribly complicated about any of this. Watch how you feel. You'll lose weight, you'll have more energy, you'll have better night's sleep, and more importantly, your whole immune system is going to be healthier to fight any of the microorganisms, that pathogens that you encounter, less likely to be susceptible. I'm Gary Knoll. That's it for our health input today. And thank you for taking the time and watching. Go to GaryKnoll.com. My archivist for 30 years, Sharon Pride, just informed me that I'm approaching 1,000 articles written, and they're on all different topics that are important for you. So go to GaryKnoll.com and scroll down, look at articles, or look at documentaries or clips from films that I've never released before. All good. Have a nice day.
Are you tired of closed-minded programming? Well, look no further than PRN.Live, the home for progressive voices.